Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Hmm.
You know how much we all need it, right? Today we're going deep on something we could all probably use a little more of, especially these days, rest.
Yeah.
But not just, uh, crashing on the couch after you've had a crazy day.
Right.
We're talking about rest as a spiritual thing, as a practice,
Hmm.
like a way to tap into a deeper peace. And specifically, we're looking at what the Bible has to say about it.
Okay.
And I think you'll find it's a lot more interesting than you might think.
It really is fascinating how much wisdom about this we can find in these ancient texts.
Right.
It's almost like they had a solution for burnout way before burnout
Right.
was a thing.
Like they knew we'd be running ourselves ragged trying to keep up with the pace of life in the 21st century.
Totally.
So where do we even begin?
Well, our source material takes us all the way back.
Okay.
Back to the book of Genesis, to the creation story. Remember how God created the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he rested.
Yeah, I remember that from Sunday school. But it always seemed a little odd to me.
Oh, yeah.
Like, did God really need to take a break? He's God, after all.
That's a great question, and the text addresses that. The point isn't that God was tired,
Okay.
but that he established a pattern for us from the very start. It's like he built rest into the fabric of existence, like work and rest, rhythm and intention. These are fundamental principles, even before humans came on the scene.
So it's like a blueprint, a divine blueprint for how we're supposed to live. I like that.
Yeah.
But what does that kind of rest actually look like in real life? I mean, I'm all for chilling out, but my to-do list is a mile long.
Right.
How do I fit spiritual rest into all of that?
Let's look at some specific examples from the Bible that give us a glimpse into this deeper kind of rest. One that comes to mind is from Psalm 4.8, where it says, "In peace I will lie down and sleep for you alone. Lord, make me dwell in safety."
Okay, that one speaks to me. You know how sometimes you're lying in bed and like a million thoughts are racing through your mind and there's no way you're going to fall asleep?
Totally.
I feel like that verse is saying that real rest comes from a deep place of peace and security.
Yeah, and it's not even just about physical sleep.
Oh,
It's pointing us to a sense of inner peace that goes beyond our circumstances.
so it's not about whether or not you have problems, but about a deep trust that allows you to rest even when you do have problems.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense, but easier said than done, right? How are we supposed to cultivate that kind of trust when life feels like it's one storm after another?
Another passage comes to mind here, Isaiah 26.3. It says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you." So the key is keeping our minds focused, fixed on something bigger than our worries.
I hear you, but my mind has a mind of its own.
Right.
It tends to wander, especially towards problems. And any tips on how to keep our mind steadfast, like the verse says?
Well, the text gives us a powerful example to illustrate this.
Okay.
The story of Jesus calming the storm.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that
The
one?
one where the disciples are freaking out in the boat
Yeah.
during a huge storm,
Yeah, a massive storm.
and Jesus is sound asleep.
Yes.
That's calming under pressure. I have trouble sleeping through like a noisy neighbor,
Right.
let alone a raging storm.
It is a striking image, and that's exactly the point. You've got the disciples terrified, you've got the waves crashing over the boat, and Jesus is sleeping peacefully.
Right.
This is about finding that inner stillness, that unshakable peace, even when everything around you is going crazy.
Okay, I get the symbolism, but how are we supposed to tap into that kind of peace when our minds are screaming about deadlines and bills and family drama, all the things that keep us up at night? It just seems impossible.
It's definitely not easy, and the text doesn't try to say that it is, but it points to something really important here.
Okay.
Trust. It takes us back to that beautiful imagery in Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul."
Every time I hear those words, it's like this wave of calm washes over me. There's something so comforting, so reassuring about that imagery of being cared for, of being led to safety and peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sense of being cared for, of being guided and protected,
Right.
that's at the heart of what the text is saying about trust.
Okay.
Just like sheep trust their shepherd to lead them to good pastures and protect them from danger, we're invited to trust that there is a higher power who's got our back, who's looking out for our well-being.
So this isn't just about taking a break.
Right.
It's about letting go.
Yes.
about surrendering control,
Yeah.
about not having to figure everything out ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought, I think, for a lot of us. Like, letting go of control can feel like you're falling into this abyss.
I understand that, and the text gets that surrender isn't always easy, but it also reminds us that we're not surrendering to some distant, indifferent force. It points to John 10:11, where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah,
If he's willing to sacrifice that much for us, then maybe letting go of the reins a little bit isn't such a bad idea after all. It really puts things into perspective.
it does. It
Yeah.
invites us to ask ourselves, what are we holding on to so tightly that we can't release it to him?
Mm.
What are we so afraid of?
That's a big question, and I think we need some time to let that sink in. We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into the gift of rest.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but I'm still thinking about everything we talked about in that last segment.
Yeah.
It's really a lot to think about.
Mm.
This idea of rest as surrender, as trust.
Hmm.
It really challenges a lot of what we think we know about, well, everything.
Really does.
Like how we're supposed to live, what it means to be successful.
Yeah, about productivity and self-reliance. Right. It's like everything in our culture tells us that we always have to be doing something,
Mm-hmm.
striving, achieving,
Always on the go.
always on the go. And then rest is something you earn,
Yeah.
like a reward for all that hard work.
Right, exactly. And that's what the source material wants us to question. What if rest isn't something you earn, but something you receive? A gift, not a trophy you have to win.
That's a pretty radical idea,
It is.
especially these days. But there's something about it that's really liberating.
I know, right? It takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
It allows us to step out of that constant striving and into a space of grace and acceptance.
You know, one thing that really struck me in the last section was this idea of Jesus's yoke being easy and his burden light.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds kind of paradoxical,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we're talking about burdens.
Mm-hmm.
How can a burden be light?
That's a great question, and it goes right to the heart of what this deeper rest is about.
Okay.
Remember, we're not talking about physical relaxation here. This is a spiritual practice.
Right.
It's a way of being in the world that changes how we experience everything, even our burdens.
So it's not that the burden disappears, but that something changes in how we carry it.
Exactly. It's about finding a different way to connect with our challenges, our struggles, our pain, even.
Okay.
And the image of the yoke is such a powerful metaphor for this.
For those of us who aren't familiar with the ancient farming techniques,
Word.
can you unpack that metaphor a little bit?
Sure. A yoke is a wooden frame that joins two oxen together,
Okay.
so they can plow a field together. It's about sharing the load, distributing the weight so that neither ox has to carry the whole burden alone. And that's what Jesus is offering us.
Mhm.
Partnership, support, shared responsibility.
So it's like having someone to lean on, literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
We're not meant to carry all of life's burdens by ourselves.
Right, and the text emphasizes that Jesus isn't just any helper.
Okay.
He's the good shepherd, the one who lays down his life for his sheep. That's a level of commitment that's beyond any earthly relationship.
It's like knowing you have this ultimate backup no matter what. Someone who's always in your corner, always willing to help you carry the load.
Yes, and that knowledge, that deep trust, is what lightens the burden. Not because the problem goes away, but because we're not facing it alone. We have a partner, a guide, a source of strength that's always there for us.
It makes me think about all the times I've tried to muscle through things on my own,
Yeah.
convinced that I had to be strong and independent and that I can handle everything myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always exhausting. It always leads to burnout.
That's a common experience, especially in a culture that puts such a high value on self-sufficiency. But what if real strength comes not from our ability to do it all, but from our willingness to ask for help, to lean on others, to surrender to something bigger than ourselves?
It's like we've been given this incredible gift, this offer of support, of shared burden bearing, but we're too proud, too afraid, too stubborn to accept it.
It's true. And the irony is that accepting help, allowing ourselves to be supported, is actually a sign of strength, not weakness.
Right.
It takes courage to admit we can't do it all, to acknowledge our limits and open ourselves to receiving care.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
It's like we've been told that needing help means you're weak, but actually it's a sign of wisdom,
Right.
of self-awareness, of knowing your limits and honoring your need for connection.
Exactly. And when we can change our thinking that way, it opens up a whole new possibility for experiencing rest.
Okay.
It's not about escaping from our responsibilities,
Right.
but about finding a different way to engage with them. a way that's sustainable, life-giving, and ultimately more joyful.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like we're not meant to be solo acts, but part of an orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
each playing our own part in harmony with everyone else,
Mm.
and with the conductor who's guiding us through the symphony of life.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it highlights how everything is connected.
Right.
We're not isolated individuals struggling to make it on our own.
Yeah,
We're part of this web of relationships, a community of support,
right.
a symphony of souls all searching for harmony and peace.
All this talk about surrender and trust makes me think about the times I felt most at peace.
Mm.
Usually when I'm out in nature, hiking in the woods, swimming in the ocean, just being present in the beauty and stillness of the natural world. It's like all my worries fade away and I can just be.
That's beautiful. And I think there's a deep connection between our experience of rest and our connection to nature.
Right.
When we're immersed in nature, we're reminded that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves, something ancient and wise and inherently peaceful.
It's like we're tapping into a source of rest that's always been there, a rhythm of life that's been flowing since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And when we align ourselves with that rhythm, it brings a sense of peace that's hard to find anywhere else.
And that sense of peace doesn't depend on what's happening around you.
Right.
It's not something you have to make happen or force. It's a way of being that comes naturally when we surrender to the present moment, when we trust in the wisdom of nature, and when we allow ourselves to be held and supported by something greater than ourselves.
This has been a really great conversation.
It has.
I feel like we've only just started to explore this topic,
Yeah.
but I'm already seeing rest in a completely different way.
Mm.
It's not just about taking a break. It's about changing how we live, how we relate to ourselves, to others, to the world around us.
It is. And that transformation is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
It's a process of letting go, of opening up, of aligning ourselves with a deeper rhythm of life that's always been there,
Right.
waiting for us to discover it.
I think we could all use a little more of that rhythm in our lives.
I agree.
We've talked about it a lot,
We have.
and I feel like I need some time to think about it all. Maybe our listeners do too.
Yeah.
We'll be right back to wrap up this deep dive into the gift of rest. We're back, and wow, we covered a lot in that last segment. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. It's like we've been thinking about rest in completely the wrong way,
Yeah.
focusing on all the externals instead of what's going on inside.
Yeah, we've been trained to think about rest as something we do instead of something we become.
It's like we keep trying to force this square peg of rest into this round hole of our crazy overscheduled lives.
Yeah.
And you said it yourself, it's not working.
Right, it's not working. We're burned out and depleted, running on fumes because we're trying to cram rest into a system that was never designed for it.
So how do we break free from that system? How do we create space for this deeper kind of rest? The kind that changes how we actually live our lives, not just how we spend our weekends.
That's the question, isn't it? I think the key here is understanding that real rest isn't so much about what we do, it's more about how we be. It's about cultivating a sense of inner peace that's not dependent on anything outside of ourselves.
So not checking out from our responsibilities, but approaching them in a different way, a way that comes from a place of peace and trust.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective is where real transformation happens. It's about realizing that rest isn't something you earn, it's something you receive. It's a gift, not a trophy you have to win.
It's a powerful reminder. Takes the pressure off, right? It allows us to move out of that go, 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 gotta strive mindset into a place of grace and acceptance.
Absolutely. And when we step into that space, a whole new way of experiencing life opens up to us. It becomes less about what we're doing and more about who we're being, less about achieving and more about receiving.
This is making me think about all the things I try to do for self-care, like bubble baths and meditation apps and stuff. But what if real self-care is about working on this inner peace, this trust in something bigger?
I think you're right on, and I think that goes right to the heart of what our source material is talking about. Rest as a spiritual practice. It's not about checking off boxes, but about deepening our relationship with the source of peace and strength that's always there for us.
So it's less about trying to escape our lives and more about learning how to be present in them, even when things are chaotic and challenging.
Yeah, exactly that. It's about finding that center of peace within, the place that doesn't get shaken, even when everything around us is spinning out of control.
That's such a great image. It's like having an anchor in the middle of a storm. How do we actually do that? How do we cultivate that kind of inner stillness when it feels like our minds are being pulled in a million directions at once?
Well, it is a practice, which means it takes time. It's something we develop over time through intention, attention, and a willingness to let go of the things that get in the way of our peace.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of calm, but about learning to be present with what is, accepting our thoughts and feelings without judgment, and gently bringing our attention back to that quiet place inside.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And it might look different for everybody. For some, it might be spending time outdoors, meditating, praying, or just doing things that bring joy and peace.
And it doesn't have to be about finding big blocks of time either. It's about bringing those practices into our daily lives, finding little moments of quiet and connection, like taking a few deep breaths before a meeting or a walk at lunch to refresh.
Exactly. It's about being deliberate,
Hmm.
about choosing things that feed our souls, not just our calendars. And that might involve creating boundaries, saying no to things that drain us, and making space for things that give us peace.
You know what's really clear after this conversation? Rest isn't a luxury, it's essential. We need it to be healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually.
I agree, absolutely. And when we see rest like that, it changes everything. How we see ourselves, our work, our relationships, how we experience the world.
It helps us show up in a more genuine, more authentic, more compassionate way.
Beautifully said. And it opens us up to experiencing a level of peace and joy that's right there in front of us in every single moment, if we're willing to see it.
This has been such a powerful and eye-opening conversation. I feel like I finally understand what it really means to rest. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up this deep dive?
If I could leave you with just one thing, it would be this. Rest isn't something you have to earn. It's a gift, offered freely, and it's available to you right now. All you have to do is open yourself to it.
That's such a beautiful thought to end on. Thank you so much for being with us today as we explored the gift of rest. We hope it's given you some things to think about, maybe even inspired you a little, and we hope you found some peace in your day.